You are now watching Believe. Do you believe?
I am very excited to be joined now by the Ringer's Danny Kelly, an absolute fantasy football guru over there and part of the awesome Ringer Fantasy Football Show. Danny, thank you so much for joining me today.
No problem. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing well. You know, it's the preseason, which means that I'm excited that football's back, but I'm also so ready for the preseason to be over. So it's that annual kind of like conflux of emotions that I'm feeling this time of year. But I'd rather it be closer than further away. So,
it feels like the Sunday scaries to me. It's like this Sunday before going back to work or whatever. The season is obviously kind of a long grind, but also very fun. So I have this weird mix of emotions. But yeah, I'm with you. I'm ready for the regular season to get going.
Yeah, it's like the first day of school is the next day, and you're kind of like, I'm really excited to see all my friends again, to see what the new year brings. But like, man, I really don't want school to come back in summer to end. So that's exactly what it feels like right now. But we are here to talk about, you know, something where hope does spring eternal, and that is fantasy football. And you know, after going from all your great draft work, you just totally change gears and get right into fantasy football. The Falcons. Maybe not a prime team when it comes to a bunch of fantasy football prospects, but there are a couple. And notably, this same podcast a year ago is where I called my shot for Cordero Patterson. So that is good. Maybe we're going to get a little bit more, one more gem out of this one this year. So let's just dive right into it and start with kind of the main relevant dude here, and that's Kyle Pitts. Finished last year as the tight end 7. You guys have him ranked at the Ringer as your tight end 3. You know, just real quickly, what are kind of your big overview expectations for Kyle Pitts?
I mean, honestly, he has elite ceiling. I think that's the cool part about him, and that's why I'm not even remotely afraid to take him. In fact, I'm excited to take him in like the 3rd round of like a regular setting draft, just because he has arguably the most talent of any tight end in the NFL at this point. I mean, obviously I'm a big believer in Travis Kelce, but he's, you know, over 30 now, potentially slowing down, potentially not playing quite as many snaps and all that stuff. Whereas Pitts is ascending. He, to me, feels like the next version of Travis Kelce in the fantasy world, in the NFL world. You know, he's like in Dynasty, which I'm a big fan of. He really much, he feels like the next Kelce, where he's going to be like either tight end 2 or tight end 1 for the next like 10 years. So I think that we're baking in a little bit of uncertainty around the offense, around the quarterback situation. And, you know, conservatively, I have him at tight end 3 behind Mark Andrews and Kelce. But like at the end of the day, I would not be surprised if he scores 10 touchdowns, he could be the tight end 1.
Let's say somebody wants to take him first tight end off the board in their, you know, early in the 2nd round or something like that, where we're seeing, you know, maybe Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews come off the board. What would be your reasons in support of that decision? And then what would be some of the comments that you may have to dissuade somebody who is just gung-ho on this is the year of Kyle Pitts?
Yeah, I would say this for the support thing, like everything I just said, plus they're going to be funneling. I think the Falcons will funnel a lot of targets to him. You know what I mean? And they're going to move him around the formation. In theory, hopefully they get him involved a little bit more in line and lining up against linebackers, because he can really just dominate in those types of matchups. Last year we saw him line up outside a lot, and, you know, corners are just better in coverage than linebackers. And so kind of getting him over the middle of the field, particularly on like play action shots down the seam, things like that, I think they could really benefit from that type of usage. And it sounds like they're starting to use him a little bit more based on like the small sample we've seen in preseason. So that I think is one thing. You know, maybe Marcus Mariota has a better season than everyone is expecting. I think that is in the realm of possibility for sure. He's looked really sharp in the preseason, as has Ritter. And so I think that there's definitely a world in which the quarterback play is better, the offense is better, and the usage is a little bit better for Kyle Pitts to emerge as the tight end 1. I think that there's a lot of scenarios in which Mark Andrews could have a regression this year based on his target rate, you know, his touchdown rate, all that stuff. And then, of course, Kelce is just, you know, the age cliff is always looming with a guy his age. And so there, like I said, there's a realistic scenario in which he's the tight end 1. It wouldn't really surprise me all that much. On the other hand, like that, the bear case, I guess, is that that number 1, Kelce is now in an offense with nobody else. And so Mahomes is just going to force feed Travis Kelce. He's going to have really, really high target rate. He's going to score a lot of touchdowns. It's a good offense still. And that's an easy way for Kelsey to finish ahead of Kyle Pitts. And that would maybe, you're not getting quite as much value as you want with Pitts taking him ahead of those other guys. And then with Mark Andrews, again, same deal. A lot of the offense gets funneled through him. Lamar Jackson didn't play for a good chunk of last year. He still was a tight end one. If Jackson plays this whole year, this offense is better. They score more touchdowns. They run more plays. There's a potential there for Mark Andrews to completely go off. So I think that's like the reasoning we have to think about when we put Kyle Pitts at tight end 3. But like in examining sort of the range of outcomes with them, like I love any of these top 3 guys, and I could see them kind of come in any different order at the end of the day. But I do love Pitts. Like, it's a talent. He's ascending. He's honestly one of the most exciting young players in the NFL, like full stop.
I totally agree. And he has looked really, really impressive so far in training camp. And, had a 52-yard catch that the most impressive thing about that catch was the way he got past the defender, not really the catch, because it's a super, super easy catch. But it sounds more like you're buying the upside on the other 2 tight ends, Travis Kelce and Mark Andrews, rather than, any negative that Kyle Pitts presents. It's just that there's a lane for them to have just massive target share, and they've already proven that they can do it at that highest level. So potentially the upside is just a little higher with those guys. But new quarterback situation, obviously, in Atlanta, and that is the big question mark with this offense. How much are you guys factoring that into kind of your projection for what Kyle Pitts can do? And you just mentioned, like, he's one of the most exciting young players. Like, when you look at Jamar Chase, you're like, but there's Joe Burrow. When you look at Mike Williams, he's got Justin Herbert. This is one of the weirder scenarios where it's like you've got a great young talent who should, by all accounts, break out, but just a massive question mark at quarterback.
Yeah. I think like the big thing is, and when you're making fantasy projections or rankings or whatever, it's like, you do have to think about those things. I mean, obviously I'm very enticed by the talent and overall just ability that he has, but the Falcons, I think, finished, I'm looking at their stats right now, 26th in the NFL in points last year. And that was with Matt Ryan at quarterback.
Yep.
And like, you have to factor in the number of points they're going to score, the yards, the plays, all of which they were like bottom 5 in last year, Falcons. And so, I mean, at the end of the day, like, fantasy is a volume game, and you have to consider the amount of volume he's going to get. And it's also impossible to ignore the fact that he only had 1 touchdown last year. Like, odds are he's going to positively regress and score more touchdowns. He's due to, but like in an offense that goes down and plays fewer plays, gets into the red zone less, more 3 and outs, more turnovers. That's kind of the type of thing you have to bake into these projections, and you have to have sort of a downside possibility that like the offense kind of holds him back.
Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Sorry, we keep saying positive regression just writ large, like in the football world. Yeah. And every time I hear that, I just think like, isn't a positive regression, don't we have a word for that? And it's just called progression. Like, isn't that what we should all just be saying, is that he's progressing? Like, I don't know.
It sounds like an oxymoron for sure.
Right.
So, but it's like actually a thing, positive regression. It's a thing.
I know. It's just so, it's one of those weird quirks of language. But yeah, I think he's definitely on a mission this year to finish with more touchdowns. I think he's going to finish with more touchdowns. I'm very bullish on Kyle Pitts, but again, it's workload, and it's how much volume can this offense sustain. But somebody who got a lot of the volume last year is Cordarrelle Patterson. He finished as the running back 9, which I actually could not believe going back and kind of doing these notes for this podcast. He finished ahead of Nick Chubb and Aaron Jones, which is wild. These are half point PPR rankings that I'm looking at, but are people buying high on Cordarrelle Patterson? Is he coming off of obviously the best year, most productive year, and therefore is he going to be a little overrated for what we think his production could be in 2022?
He, to me, is so difficult to figure out. Like, he is an enigma in the fantasy world because a lot depends on how they utilize him, I'm sure. Like, are they going to have him be sort of a early down grinder type running back where you're getting him like running in between the tackles? Are you going to try and get him involved in the passing game? Can he stay healthy? These are all questions that kind of come to my mind first off with Cordarrelle Patterson. Then of course, like the offense, all the questions about the offense that we just addressed also apply to him. And so he's one of the guys where I probably should have him a lot higher, but there's just a lot of, I guess, questions about him, from usage to negative regression in terms of like the number of points he scores and touchdowns he scores, and overall just his age and things like that. Like, it all just kind of scares me. So he could be one of those players I end up like regretting not ranking higher, because based on obviously what he did last year was like incredible. But there's also, like, to me, this guy Patterson is sort of one of those players that screams regression in a negative way. And so just a little bit worried about that.
Yeah, I do wonder to what degree was he just such a surprise early on last year that the defenses weren't really prepared for what he could do. And so he benefited a little bit, catching some teams sleeping. Then obviously he did regress as the season went along. They have pretty much not used him at all throughout camp. In fact, basically he'll get a carry and then he runs over and signs autographs with the fans, which is awesome and hilarious. And I think more players should just do that during camp, because why not? But given that, he's probably going to be fresher than he's ever been coming into a season, is he a great candidate to maybe draft, knowing that you could sell potentially even higher, even though we are saying that, they're probably buying high based on what he should do in the totality of the season. Yeah. But is he a strong candidate to say, if he has a great 4 games, I can flip him and maybe pick up, 2 guys to bolster 2 other positions on my roster? Yeah. Like, is that somebody that you'd be interested in for that reason?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he just looks like a great value overall. And that's a big reason why. Like, you could potentially, if he goes off a bunch early in the season, if you're worried about his, injury history or whatever, the age thing, like, him regressing, because didn't he have like a high ankle sprain last year, and that kind of dragged him down towards the second half of the season?
Yeah.
And so that's obviously a big factor. Injuries always kind of factor in here. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm so confused, like, and like curious how they're going to use him. Like, have you guys gotten any indication? Is he like the starting running back, or is he sort of he Deebo Samuel guy? Or I don't know. Like, it's hard to figure out.
Yeah, the real thing here that I'm trying to figure out, because I think he's going to have similar to the same volume role that he had last year, where he's going to be on the field for a lot of snaps, even, whether that's a wide receiver or kind of your de facto starting running back there. Mm-hmm. But the Falcons, I think, given the mobility that they now have at the quarterback position, you're going to see a lot more of these play action bootlegs. And is he the running back that's then selling that play action? Because that kind of takes him out, of the play a little bit. Is he, the thing about the Arthur Smith offense is when they do that play action, they like to take deep shots. They like to go deep. I don't know if Cordarrelle Patterson is your best kind of deep threat. So where does he fall in the hierarchy of the route tree? Like, these are a lot of questions that I think the mobility at quarterback that the Falcons have now bring up that weren't necessarily in place last year. So I'm right there with you. I don't know exactly how they plan to use him. He could be a huge volume guy, or he could be a huge efficiency guy who doesn't have the volume to really sustain like a flex role in fantasy.
And it's like halfway through the year, they sort of stopped using him as a receiver, it seems like. I'm just looking at his game logs here. There was one game he had 14 carries and 9 targets. Like, that to me that's like the fantasy dream,
Heck yeah.
But then as the year went on, like his targets definitely declined. Like 5, 5, 2, 2, 2, 2, 1 until the end of the year. So, he's just so tough. Like, there's such a wide range of outcomes with him. I still clearly am a believer in his talent. He's like such an explosive, dynamic player. He's so fun to watch. But I just think that the reason he's lower on our rankings, certainly than he finished last year, is just all those like question marks and variables that are going into this.
Yeah, and I should mention he's running back 32 on your list, 86th overall, which, sounds about right. Like, I think if you're getting him in around that spot, 7th, 8th, 9th round, that feels pretty solid for his upside, but also good value for the potential downside there. I still like the draft and trade strategy if you are targeting him, because I think he's going to come out pretty hot. But somebody else who I know that you are high on, having listened to a bunch of the fantasy shows over the summer, Drake London, right? Yeah. Rookie receiver, first receiver taken in the draft. I really loved you and Ben Solik going back and forth kind of during the pre-draft episode with your rookie or with your receivers. So that was fun. But tell me a little bit about why you are high on Drake London, and we've seen rookie receivers now really kind of explode in recent years as they've just look more comfortable coming in the NFL. Is Drake London in the right situation to explode from a fantasy perspective in year one?
I think so. I mean, obviously it helps that he's coming into a pass catching core that is, doesn't have anyone else essentially other than Kyle Pitts. Like I was going to say bereft of talent, but that's like maybe a little harsh. Like it's just, there's not any much proven, there's not much proven production there from the guys that are like projected to be starters. Obviously it kind of depends on how you define, because the Falcons offense is so cool that Cordarrelle Patterson and Kyle Pitts are both sort of receivers, like more like de facto receivers. But at the end of the day, yeah, he's coming in and he's the number one guy, like right away from the receiver actual point of view. And so I think he comes into a good situation. I think that the offense that they're going to run actually fits him pretty well too. Like he's good after the catch. He was surprisingly good after the catch in college for being a big guy. Broke a lot of tackles for USC. He can catch. He's very good, like contested situations in the red zone. Good hands. The questions about his speed, I think, will be mitigated a little bit by the fact that he's getting, getting into these routes and getting downfield, and he's able to like kind of get up to speed and go down and get up like to full plane, rather than trying to get open really quickly and whatever. I do think he can separate, but like that big question mark around him coming into the draft and going into the season is sort of mitigated by the fact that they're going to be doing so much of that play action stuff, and I think that really benefits him. And so, I think he like, if you look at the last 5-6 years, like almost always you see a rookie receiver or 2 or 3 breaking into the top 24 in fantasy. Like it's almost like a given now that 1 or 2 or 3 of these guys is going to be like a big name fantasy star. And so picking the right one, of course, is the hard part, but situationally, talent wise, the fact that he was a top 10 pick, he's checking a lot of boxes basically on like what you're looking for a breakout receiver. And so if he can stay healthy, I think he definitely has the ability to outplay his ADP, outplay where we've got it ranked at wide receiver 31. I could see him being like a top 15 guy, but yeah, there's of course just question marks about the offense again, and whether he is going to start the season healthy. Like I haven't heard the latest on his knee, other than basically they're looking to get him going for week 1.
Yeah, he should be okay by week 1. I'd be surprised if he plays again on Saturday in their final preseason game, but all signs are, I think, positive that he will be good to go for the regular season.
Yeah.
Yeah.
First catch.
Let's do it. I'm all here for it, because I see the thing about this offense that's going to be so interesting is the versatility. Like Cordarrelle Patterson, tall, Drake London, tall, Kyle Pitts, tall, but they can play inside and outside. These are guys that both Drake London and Kyle Pitts can line up, if not necessarily in line, like right in that tight slot split. And both guys can attack down the middle of the field in these cover 2 looks. Like they could get really interesting, but I think that this offense is either going to be the type that is like highly efficient and can sustain multiple good fantasy players, or it's just going to be really tough sledding and it's going to be like plotting, methodical. You're going to see a lot of like 21, 24 games, and there's just not a ton here week to week to count on. Hopefully Drake London can, persist through that and carry some week to week value. Is there a good player comp that we have for Drake London? Because it seems like some of these bigger guys, your Mike Evans, not that he's explosive as DeAndre Hopkins, but like, kind of these contested catch stars, they either feel like they're top 10 consistent wide receivers, or you get some of these guys who kind of don't have that necessary athleticism to really break free at, at least a decent level. And then they kind of peter out. Where is there a good fantasy comp that you have for Drake London?
I mean, the definite high-end comp for me was Mike Evans. Just like watching him play in college, it was somewhat similar. Obviously, they're not the same size. He's a little bit skinnier and slimmer than Mike Evans was coming in. But just, I don't know, stylistically, they felt pretty similar to me. And I think like the thing that people always talk about with route running and separation is you don't necessarily have to get open early in your route. Like it helps to get open early in your route if you're doing like a really quick West Coast style offense where you're like 3-step, 5-step drop and get the ball out and you catch the ball and go. But Drake London was very good at separating late too in his routes. And that's something that Mike Evans does great. And so using your length and your size and your strength to kind of like create that little bit of separation right when the ball's arriving, like you don't need to be wide open in the NFL. Like very few NFL players get wide open. And so I kind of saw that as a similar style, like player, but there's obviously a lot of, like you said, there's a lot of low end comps too that are scary, and you definitely don't want you don't want to get comped to a guy like, I don't know, JJ Arcega-Whiteside. He like came into the NFL, big guy, catch point prowess. I was actually very excited about him coming into the NFL, and he just couldn't put it all together. Like, number one, he has even been pretty terrible at catch point like stuff, like contested catch stuff, which is like kind of one of his calling cards. And in college, he just hasn't done it in the NFL. In addition to like not being able to separate or do anything else. But so like there's a huge range of outcomes here, I think, with him. But I'm definitely way more confident that he'll be, like he's even kind of similar a little bit to like a Michael Pittman style receiver. So obviously former teammates, the production he was able to put up with, were Michael Pittman and Amon-Ra St. Brown and him all on the same field at the same time? Like, I'm fuzzy on all the timelines, of course, but like going up and playing with those types of guys, he was still able to, carve his role out in the offense. Obviously this past year he didn't play with them, but like earlier in his career. And so I don't know. I just think, he's a dynamic, versatile type guy who can use his size at the catch point, but he's also like a very good route runner. So I'm not too worried about the bust potential. Of course, all these guys come with some bust potential, but I think it's a good fit for him. I think it's a good situation for him to be a high volume type guy, immediate opportunity. And like I said, he checks a lot of the boxes.
I definitely think he does, and I'm bullish on Drake London. I think he is much closer to that Mike Evans comp. And I mean, when I saw him running screens and jet sweeps at USC, I was like, all right, this dude can clearly move. They clearly think that he can run after the catch a little bit. So I'm not too worried about his athleticism. No. Real quick, because I don't think that this is going to necessarily be a fantasy relevant player, but is the best case scenario for Marcus Mariota, let's assume that he starts 14 games this season, kind of like best case scenario version of Marcus Mariota within reason. Is he worth drafting at any point?
Well, in a 2 quarterback league, yeah, for sure. In a 1 quarterback league, I mean, he's probably more of like let's see how it goes in week 1 and then pick him up on waivers, because I don't think you need to draft him to still get him. Of course, if you'd rather skip that whole process, you could take him with your last pick and see how it goes. I think obviously the one variable that's most important here is like, is he going to be running a lot? Even if he's just scrambling a lot, that's really good for fantasy. We saw like Jalen Hurts, he definitely got a ton of rushing yards on design runs, but he was scrambling a lot too and picking up yards on broken plays. And I mean, we've seen Mariota do that. He's fast. He's very sleek. He's kind of like got like gazelle like speed. He just kind of he's faster than you think, and
deceptive speed.
God. I didn't mean to like allude to that, but yes, he does have deceptive speed. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think if he's scrambling a lot, if he's producing some explosive plays in this offense on play action, like, there's definitely, I think it's definitely possible that he has fantasy value because of the Konami code, like the rushing ability. The rushing yards are worth more than passing yards. Rushing touchdowns are worth more than passing touchdowns for quarterbacks. That's why we call it the cheat code. And I mean, if he's rushing and running a lot and scoring a handful of red zone touchdowns, like, yeah, he's going to definitely be worth keeping an eye on in fantasy. But it's been a long time. He, obviously has not been a successful starter in the past, like on a long-term basis. And so there's a lot of question marks here, but like, you never know. I mean, like this offense could really kind of like invigorate him, and it just might work out.
Yeah, the rushing thing is definitely a big positive. I was surprised to see his highest rushing output in a season was 2018, only 357 yards. But I think he'll top that if he plays enough games this year. So that's definitely something that should help. Last question before I let you get out of here. Just so we don't make it all about the Falcons, who are 4 guys that people should feel good about their draft if they close out whatever browser they're using at the end of their draft and they know they got these 4 guys on their team? Who are some guys that they should feel good about?
I'll just rattle off a few of my favorites here. Saquon Barkley, I really like. We keep moving him up. We can't like help it. Saquon Barkley, just too talented. CeeDee Lamb. I mean, this is like Saquon Barkley in the first, CeeDee in the second. That's to me the dream draft. I'm excited about Travis Etienne from the Jags. Obviously, he's going to be sharing snaps with James Robinson, but he is, to me, like picture the DeAndre Swift of this season kind of deal. Like he's going to be more pass catcher, more passing downs. They're going to be trailing a lot, most likely. And then let's go down the list here. Amon-Ra St. Brown.
Yeah.
I mean, that guy, to me, he's just like so good. And
He's
obviously
smooth,
has
man.
a huge connection with Jared Goff. I think this offense is going to be better this year than they were last year by a pretty big clip. And, you know, he's going to be the go-to guy. Last year, there was a stretch there, like a 6 week stretch where he was like literally the wide receiver 2. So, yeah, you can get him right now, like in 4th, 5th, 6th round. So I'm taking that all day. Was that 4? Did I name 4? Yes, I did.
I think so. I think you got it with Amon-Ra there. Awesome, man. Danny, thank you so much. Everybody, please go follow Danny on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly. Go check out all of his great stuff at The Ringer. Honestly, their fantasy draft guide has helped me win redacted number of leagues over the years. So definitely check it out and have it pulled up. Anything else that I'm forgetting, Danny, that you want to let people know that you've got coming down the pipe?
No, just check us out. Check me out at theringer.com. I do some writing there as well. But yeah, the Ringer Fantasy Football Show podcast and the Ringer Fantasy Draft Guide / Ringer Fantasy Rankings, which we'll have updating throughout the season.
Heck yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much again, Danny. I really appreciate the time.
Absolutely.